Page 46. A. The Crossfire Hurricane Investigation. 1. New York Field Office Investigation of Page. In late March 2016, Carter Page, an American energy consultant, was named a foreign policy advisor to Donald Trump's 2016 presidential campaign. Page's prior business experience was largely focused on Russian and Eurasian energy issues, and as such, he frequently interacted with various Russian nationals. Based on his previous Russian contacts, Page was known to the FBI and had been interviewed on 3 occasions between 2009 and 2013 by the New York Field Office, NYFO. In 2015, Page was again interviewed by the FBI in connection with the indictment of 3 Russian intelligence officers in the Southern District of New York. According to the criminal complaint and subsequently returned indictment in that case, Page had been approached by the intelligence officers in an apparent failed recruitment effort. In the criminal complaint, one intelligence officer referred to Page, anonymized as Male 1, as an idiot, and Page does not seem to have been receptive to the recruitment efforts. Page was interviewed by prosecutors as a possible government witness in the case. One defendant, Evgeny Buryakov, pleaded guilty before trial and was sentenced to 30 months of imprisonment. The 2 other defendants in the case were protected by diplomatic immunity and are no longer in the United States. In April 2016, shortly after Page was named as an advisor to the Trump campaign, the New York Field Office opened a counterintelligence investigation of him. According to the case agent in the matter, New York Field Office Case Agent 1, in opening the investigation, the FBI was not so, page 47, concerned about Page, but rather it was concerned about the Russians reaching out to Page. Moreover, New York Field Office Case Agent 1 told the office that there were no plans to seek FISA coverage on Page. New York Field Office Case Agent 1 and her FBI supervisor informed the OIG that Page's role as a foreign policy advisor did not influence their decision to open a case on Page. It may, however, have affected the timing of the case opening and increased interest in him. Indeed, Director Comey had earlier in April requested relevant information pertaining to any presidential candidate. In line with that directive, Comey was briefed on the Page investigation, which a week later was described as a top priority for the director. At that time, FBI personnel in Washington prepared a counterintelligence report on Page for the director. In July, the same personnel described the Page case and ones like it as a top priority for Director Comey. In any event, despite Page's role as a publicly named foreign policy advisor, the FBI did not open the investigation as a sensitive investigative matter, or otherwise known as a SIM. A few months later, shortly after the FBI opened the Crossfire Hurricane investigation at FBI headquarters and the 4 subfiles, including on Page, the New York Field Office's investigation of Page was transferred to the Crossfire Hurricane investigation at FBI headquarters. 2. Evidence of predisposition to investigate Trump. The record reviewed by the office demonstrated a rather clear predisposition on the part of at least certain FBI personnel at the center of Crossfire Hurricane to open an, page 48, investigation of Trump. For example, Peter Strzok and Lisa Page were directly involved in matters relating to the opening of Crossfire Hurricane. Strzok was an agent who both wrote and approved the electronic communication opening that matter from the very start as a full investigation rather than an assessment or preliminary investigation. At the time, Page was serving as Deputy Director Andrew McCabe's special assistant, and according to Strzok, it was McCabe who directed that the Crossfire Hurricane investigation be opened immediately, after information described more fully below was received from Australian authorities in late July 2016. Over a period of months prior to the opening of Crossfire Hurricane, Strzok and Page had exchanged numerous messages which are already in the public domain and express a very clear prejudice against Trump. For example, August 16, 2015, Strzok: Bernie Sanders is an idiot like Trump. December 2015, after exchanging an article about Trump, Page: what an utter idiot. Strzok: no doubt. March 3, 2016, Page: God, Trump is a loathsome human. Strzok: yet he may win the Republican nomination. Good for Hillary. Page: It is. Stroke. Would he be a worse president than Cruz? Page. Trump? Yes, I think so. Stroke. I'm not sure. OMG, Trump's an idiot. Page. He's awful. Stroke. America will get what the voting public deserves. Page. That's what I'm afraid of. There's a sub reference that I want to read. 189 at the bottom of page 48. Stroke was a section chief and later the deputy assistant director in the FBI's counterintelligence division. For the positions held by those involved in the Crossfire Hurricane investigation, see the chart in the redacted OIG review at page 81 and 82. Stroke agreed to provide information to the office concerning matters related to the FBI's Alpha Bank investigation, but otherwise declined to be interviewed by the office on matters related to his role in the Crossfire Hurricane investigation. 190. Page was an attorney in FBI's OGC who was detailed as a special assistant to Deputy Director McCabe's office. Okay, page 49. Stroke. God, Hillary should win 100 million to 0. May 13, 2016. Page. A wholly explicitive. Cruz just dropped out of the race. It's going to be a Clinton-Trump race. Unbelievable. Stroke. What? Question mark, exclamation point. Several of those. Page. You heard that right, my friend. Stroke. I saw Trump won. Figured it would be a bit. Now the pressure really starts to finish. In parentheses, the Clinton email investigation. Page. It sure does. July 18, 2016. During the Republican National Convention. Stroke. Ooh, turn it on, exclamation points. The douchebags are about to come out. You can tell by the excitable clapping. Page. And wow, Donald Trump is an enormous douche. July 19, 2016. Stroke. Hi, how is Trump other than a douche? Page. Trump barely spoke, but the first thing out of his mouth was, we're going to win so big. The whole thing is like living in a bad dream. July 21, 2016. Stroke. Trump is a disaster. I have no idea how destabilizing his presidency would be. July 27, 2016. Page. Have we opened on him yet? Trump and Putin? Yes, it's really a thing. And then it's a link to Talking Point Memo, blog, Trump, Putin. Yes, it is really a thing. Stroke. Opened on Trump? If Hillary did, 5 field offices would. Page 50. As discussed more fully below, the next day, July 28, 2016, FBI headquarters received the Australian information that formed the basis for opening of Crossfire Hurricane. On Sunday, July 31, 2016, Stroke, as he has written, he was directed to do so by McCabe, immediately opened Crossfire Hurricane. He both drafted and approved, with the authorization of Assistant Director Priestap, the Crossfire Hurricane opening communication. August 8, 2016, text message. Page. Trump's not going to become president, right? Right? Stroke. No, he's not. We'll stop it. Similarly, and as discussed in more detail below, FBI OGC attorney Kevin Kleinsmith made troubling statements demonstrating a blatant political bias against Trump. Kleinsmith, who played a central role in the Page FISA process on the day after Trump's election as president, stated to fellow FBI personnel, among other things, Viva la resistance, an obvious reference to those individuals opposed to Trump. Although those involved in opening the Crossfire Hurricane investigation denied that bias against Trump was a factor in opening the investigation, the communications quoted, page 51, above quite clearly show, at least on the part of certain personnel intimately involved in the matter, a predisposition to open an investigation into Trump. I'm going to go back up to page 50. There are some references. It says redacted OIG review at 5358 regarding Strokes having direct access to McCabe. When asked if he was aware of people going around him to the 7th floor, meaning jumping the chain of command and going to the FBI executive offices on the 7th floor, Priestap replied, Oh yeah. While Priestap stated he could not remember the specifics, Lisa Page was a concern without question in his respect. In addition, there were multiple times when Stroke mentioned something to Priestap and shared it with Page, who in turn shared the information with Deputy Director McCabe. There were also instances when Stroke shared information directly with McCabe before Priestap could provide the information to McCabe himself. Priestap said these actions drove him insane. That was in quotes. He also told the office that Stroke was the worst offender in this regard and that these events occurred mostly when he, Priestap, wanted to go in one direction and they, Page and Stroke, disagreed and thus went around him. Priestap agreed to provide information to the office concerning matters related to the FBI's Alpha Bank investigation, but otherwise declined to be interviewed by the office on matters related to his role in the Crossfire Hurricane investigation. All right, back down to 51. Number 3, the opening of Crossfire Hurricane. The FBI opened Crossfire Hurricane as a full counterintelligence investigation to determine whether individuals associated with the Trump campaign were witting of and or coordinating activities with the government of Russia. The starting point for the office's inquiry was to examine what information was known or valuable to the FBI about any such ties as of July 31, 2016, prior to opening Crossfire Hurricane. That question then divided itself into two related questions. What was the information that predicated the opening of the investigation? And 2, did that information support such an investigation being open not as an assessment or preliminary investigation, but from the start as a full investigation? In exploring these questions, we determined the following. A, the information used to predicate Crossfire Hurricane. In March 2016, the Trump campaign identified George Papadopoulos as a foreign policy advisor. Papadopoulos had previously worked as an energy consultant with a particular focus on projects in the Eastern Mediterranean. At the time of his appointment, Papadopoulos was employed in the United Kingdom at the London Center of International Law Practice. Among Papadopoulos' acquaintances in London was a diplomat from another country, Foreign Government 1, Diplomat 1. Foreign Government 1, Diplomat 1 was familiar with an Australian Diplomat 1. On May 6, 2016, by prearrangement, Foreign Government 1, Diplomat 1 introduced Papadopoulos to Australian Diplomat 1. On May 10, 2016, Papadopoulos and Australian Diplomat 1 met again, and this time they were joined, page 52, by Australian High Commissioner Alexander Downer. Both meetings were over drinks in public settings. The Australian diplomats were much interested in meeting with Papadopoulos because of his role in the Trump campaign, and much of the conversation centered on the upcoming U.S. election. Over 2 months later, on July 26, 2016, Australia provided the U.S. Embassy in London certain information as diplomats had memorialized at or around the time of the meetings with Papadopoulos. The next day, the State Department passed this information on to the FBI's legal attaché assigned to the embassy in London, UK Legat 1. Paragraph 5 was the name given to the raw information provided by the Australian government and included in a May 16, 2016 cable that documented the diplomats' encounters with Papadopoulos. Paragraph 5 is an abstract from the cable and was quoted verbatim in the Crossfire Hurricane opening EC, stating in its entirety that Mr. Papadopoulos was, unsurprisingly, confident that Mr. Trump could win the election. He commented that Clintons had a lot of baggage and suggested the Trump team had plenty of material to use in its campaign. He also suggested the Trump team had received some kind of suggestion from Russia that it could assist this process with the anonymous release of information during the campaign that would be damaging to Mrs. Clinton and President Obama. It was unclear whether he or the Russians were referring to material acquired publicly or through other means. It was also unclear how Mr. Trump's team would react to the offer. We note that Trump, page 53, team's reaction could, in the end, have little bearing of what Russia decides to do or without Mr. Trump's cooperation. The Australian account reflects that 2 meetings of a casual nature took place with Papadopoulos. These meetings were documented by Downer on May 11, 2016, and by Australian Diplomat 1 later that month. Both diplomats advised that prior to the spring of 2016, Papadopoulos was unknown to them. Notably, the information in paragraph 5 does not include any mention of the hacking of the DNC, the Russians being in possession of emails, or the public release of any emails. In addition, when interviewed by the office, Downer stated that he would have characterized the statements made by Papadopoulos differently than the Australian Diplomat 1 did in paragraph 5. According to Downer, Papadopoulos made no mention of Clinton emails, dirt, or any specific approach by the Russian government to the Trump campaign team with an offer or suggestion of providing assistance. Rather, Downer's recollection was that Papadopoulos simply stated the Russians have information, and that was all. As recounted to the FBI on August 2, 2016 by Australian Diplomat 1, The substance of paragraph 5 was written in a purposely vague way. This was done because Papadopoulos left a number of things unexplained and did not say he had direct contact. There's a lot of subheadings on the information on these. The last few pages. I'm gonna read this one here. We note that there is an inconsistency in the statements given by Australian Diplomat 1 and former High Commissioner Downer to the Crossfire Hurricane interviews in August 2016 and what they told the office when interviewed in October 2019. Australian Diplomat 1 and Downer were interviewed together in August 2016, and according to the FD 302 prepared afterward by Supervisory Special Agent 1, Papadopoulos made this statement about the Russians during the May 6, 2016 introduction meeting when he met only with Russian Diplomat 1. When the two diplomats were interviewed separately by the office in October 2019, investigators were advised that Papadopoulos made this statement in front of both Australian Diplomat 1 and Downer during the second meeting on May 10, 2016. The meeting with Papadopoulos took place on May 6 and 10, 2016. The Australian diplomats documented the meeting in two cables dated May 11 and May 16. The OSC report of interview of Alexander Downer, October 9, 2019, at 1 OSC report of interview of Australian Diplomat 1 on October 9, 2019. OSC report of interview and Alexander Downer, October 9, 2019. Downer is also reported to have stated in an interview that in talking with Papadopoulos, there was no suggestion that there was collusion between Donald Trump or Donald Trump's campaign and the Russians. And there's a reference to that. I'm not going to read. Page 54. With the Russians, the impression Papadopoulos made on the Australian diplomats was wide-ranging. On one hand, he had an inflated sense of self, was insecure, and was trying to impress. And on the other hand, he was a nice guy, was not negative, and did not name drop. Downer noted that he was impressed Papadopoulos acknowledged his lack of expertise and felt the response was uncommon for someone in Papadopoulos' age, political experience, and for someone thrust into the spotlight overnight. Many people in a similar position would represent themselves differently, and Downer would have sniffed them out. If Downer believed Papadopoulos was a fraud, he would have not recorded the reporting and reported on the meeting he had with Papadopoulos. Downer also said that he did not get the sense Papadopoulos was the middleman to coordinate with the Russians. The Australian diplomats would later inform the FBI and subsequently the office that the impetus for passing the paragraph 5 information in late July was the public release by WikiLeaks on July 22, 2016 of email communications that had been hacked from the DNC servers. As far as the office investigation was able to determine, Papadopoulos' comments did not undergo any additional analysis or scrutiny by Australian intelligence officials. The lack of intelligence information supporting the premise of Crossfire Hurricane. As an initial matter, there is no question that the FBI had an affirmative obligation to closely examine the paragraph 5 information. The paragraph 5 information, however, was the sole basis cited by the FBI for opening a full investigation into the individuals associated with the ongoing Trump campaign. Significantly, the FBI opened a full investigation before any preliminary discussions or interviews were undertaken with either the Australian diplomats or Papadopoulos. Further, the opening EC does not describe any collaboration or joint assessments of the information with either friendly foreign intelligence services or other U.S. intelligence agencies. In effect, within 3 days of its receipt of the paragraph 5 reporting, the FBI determined without further analysis that the, page 55, Australian information was an adequate basis for opening a full investigation into whether individuals associated with an ongoing presidential campaign were witting of and or coordinated activities with the government of Russia. In his interview with the office, Executive Assistant Director for National Security, Michael Steinbach, commented on the sufficiency of the information in the opening EC, stating that it was poorly written. Steinbach added that the EC should not be read to suggest that the FBI was investigating the Trump campaign, but only those potential subjects within the campaign whose activities justified inquiry. Steinbach was also questioned separately by the OIG on the amount of information that should normally be included in an EC opening a counterintelligence case. He stated that it should be a logical summary sufficient to justify the opening. Steinbach told the OIG, by way of an example, it's, hey, look, I have Michael Steinbach on this date, met with Russian, who we know is associated with this intelligence organization. and lay that out and open a preliminary investigation. Although not referenced in the opening EC, FBI officials have later pointed to the importance of the Australian information when viewed in conjunction with Russia's likely connection to the WikiLeaks disclosures and its efforts to interfere with the 2016 U.S. elections. In addition, Trump had also stated in a recently televised campaign speech, "Russia, if you're listening, I hope you're able to find the 30,000 emails that are missing." Page 56. A widely reported statement that appears to have referred to emails stored on the personal servers that Clinton used while Secretary of State. The evidence the office reviewed shows that there were internal discussions with FBI headquarters executives, including the deputy director, about the decision to open Crossfire Hurricane. The executives were unanimous in supporting the opening of the investigation, and there is no indication that these discussions contemplated anything short of an immediate full investigation, such as an assessment or preliminary investigation into the meaning, credibility, and underpinnings of the statements attributed to Papadopoulos. The personnel involved in the decision to open a full investigation have stated that they acted within the FBI's governing principles as set forth in the AGG-DOM and DIOG that required an authorized purpose and an articulable factual basis for the investigation that reasonably indicates that an activity constituting a federal crime or a national security threat may be occurring. But notably, the DIOG also explicitly cautions FBI employees to avoid reputational risk to those being investigated by, among other things, specifying different standards for opening an assessment, a preliminary investigation, and a full investigation with a corresponding continuum of permissible investigative activities. That measured approach does not appear to have been followed with respect to the Crossfire Hurricane. Instead, as described above, on a Sunday and just 3 days after receiving the unanalyzed information from Australia, Stroke authorized and approved the Crossfire Hurricane opening EC. Thus, a full counterintelligence investigation to the SIM was triggered, and at the height of a political campaign, before any dialogue with Australia or the intelligence community, and prior to any critical analysis of the information itself or the potential risk of, page 57, of error or disinformation. Issues that appropriately are addressed during assessments or preliminary investigations. I'm going to read some references. The bottom of page 56. Trump at 109, as well as to the OIG that Australian High Commissioner Downer was prompted to turn over the paragraph 5 information upon seeing Trump's televised news conference during which Trump made his "Russia, if you're listening" comment. Stroke compromised at 109. OIG interview of Peter Stroke on May 8, 2018 at 15. Stroke's version of this is factually inaccurate and contrary to the FBI's report of the August 2, 2016 interview of Downer at Australian Diplomat 1, an interview that Stroke himself conducted. The report of interview does not refer to Trump's news conference or the missing Clinton emails. Moreover, Downer and Australian officials came to the U.S. Embassy with the paragraph 5 information on July 26th, 1 day before Trump's televised news conference. As referenced above in footnote 189, Stroke declined to be interviewed by the office on this and other subjects. Crossfire Hurricane opening EC at one second. Sorry, sometimes I don't understand what some of these references are, so I'm just going to read it. Crossfire Hurricane opening EC at 1. The speed of this action sharply contrasts with Stroke's decision-making in the referral in September 2016 of a matter involving former Congressman Anthony Weiner's laptop computer. In that instance, according to the OIG, the FBI and Stroke did not act for over a month to pursue a legal process to review thousands of missing Clinton emails found on Weiner's laptop. The OIG sharply criticized the FBI and particularly Stroke for this delay. As discussed more fully below, the immediate opening of Crossfire Hurricane as a full investigation contrasts with the care taken in connection with the investigation of the Clinton Foundation and other matters. Page 57. The error of disinformation issues that appropriately are addressed during assessments or preliminary investigations. That's where I left off before. The information from Papadopoulos was, in the words of one FBI executive, a tipping point. When interviewed by the OIG, FBI Deputy Director Counsel Tricia Anderson stated that it would have been a dereliction of duty had the FBI not opened Crossfire Hurricane. For his part, the FBI General Counsel James Baker told the OIG that the opening of an investigation and doing it quickly is a good thing for oversight because it forces the institution of the FBI to eventually the Department of Justice to have appropriate management controls over what's going on. In this regard, the OIG review found that in early 2016, after the opening of Crossfire Hurricane, the NSD officials were briefed on at least 2 occasions about the investigation. The FBI officials have acknowledged that they were aware that the information concerning Papadopoulos did not come from Australia's intelligence services, but rather from Australian diplomats who were previously unknown to the FBI personnel handling the Paragraph 5 information. In various interviews, several FBI officials have opined that the FBI was justified in opening Crossfire Hurricane as a full investigation because, in part, the information was given to the FBI from a trusted partner and therefore was deemed reliable. Although this sentiment is understandable, the FBI's well-placed trust in a foreign partner should not equate to confidence in the shared information itself. Australia could not and did not make any representation about the credibility of the information. Although the Counterintelligence Division did eventually seek information about Papadopoulos, the office found no indications from the witness testimony, electronic communications, emails, calendar entries, or other documentation that at the time the FBI gave any consideration to the actual trustworthiness of the information of the diplomats. Page 58. Received from Papadopoulos, an individual whom they described as, among other things, insecure and trying to impress them. The information from Papadopoulos was clearly raw and unevaluated. It was not the product of normal intelligence, community collection, and analysis, and it lacked the standard caveats accompanying uncorroborated information from an individual whose information was being seen for the first time. The information involving an ongoing presidential campaign was precisely the kind of unevaluated information that required rigorous analysis in order to assess its relevance and value. Nevertheless, the FBI predicated Crossfire Hurricane and its subsequent investigative activities, including the use of CHS's undercover operations and FISA coverage, on the statements attributed to Papadopoulos. Thus, at the time of opening Crossfire Hurricane, the FBI had publicly available information concerning Papadopoulos' role in the campaign as a volunteer foreign policy advisor, information obtained from Papadopoulos by the Australian diplomats, information about Russia's likely election interference activities, Trump's public statements about Russia, and unvetted media reporting on possible ties between Trump and Russian businessmen. Significantly, beyond this, the FBI's Counterintelligence Division and its Crossfire Hurricane investigators did not possess any intelligence or other vetted, corroborated information regarding Trump or his campaign staff, colluding with the Russian government. The FBI OGC unit chief, who advised on many Crossfire Hurricane matters and approved the case being opened as a SIM, FBI OGC Unit Chief 1, noted that she lacked knowledge of alleged ties between the Trump campaign and Russia prior to the page 29 Crossfire Hurricane investigation being formally opened. The FBI Inspection Division report describes similar statements by others. As noted in that FBI internal review, this total lack of intelligence did not appear to have been considered significant when opening a full investigation on persons associated with an active presidential campaign. I'm going to jump back up to some footnotes on page 58. Discussing the views of Papadopoulos held by the Australian diplomats and noting his strengths and weaknesses. Understandably, as noted below, when Crossfire Hurricane was opened, serious efforts were made to keep the investigation quiet so as not to interfere with the upcoming election. Ultimately, however, the Mueller investigation reported that, when interviewed, Papadopoulos and the campaign officials who interacted with him told the Mueller office that they could not recall Papadopoulos sharing the information that Russia had obtained dirt on candidate Clinton in the form of emails, or that Russia could assist the campaign through the anonymous release of information about Clinton. No documentary evidence and nothing in the email accounts or other communications facilities reviewed by the Mueller office show that Papadopoulos shared this information with the campaign. In July 2016, the New York field office received some of the reports that later came to be known as the Steele dossier. The office found no evidence, however, suggesting that Stroke, who wrote and approved the Crossfire Hurricane opening EC, was aware of those reports when he opened the investigation, and the Crossfire Hurricane investigators did not receive the report until mid-September. End of footnotes, continuing on page 59. As the record now reflects, at the time of the opening of Crossfire Hurricane, the FBI did not possess any intelligence showing that anyone associated with the Trump campaign was in contact with Russian intelligence officers at any point during the campaign. Moreover, the now more complete record of facts relevant to the opening of Crossfire Hurricane is illuminating. Indeed, at the time Crossfire Hurricane was opened, the FBI, albeit not the Crossfire Hurricane investigators, was in possession of some of the Steele reports. However, even if the Crossfire Hurricane investigators were in possession of the Steele reports earlier, they would not have been aware of the fact that the Russians were cognizant of Steele's election-related reporting. The SSCI Russia report notes that sensitive reporting from June 2017 indicated that a person affiliated to Russian oligarch 1 was possibly aware of Steele's election investigation as early as July 2016. Indeed, an early June 2017 U.S. IC report indicated that 2 persons affiliated with Russian intelligence services were aware of Steele's election investigation in early June or July 2016. Put more pointedly, Russian intelligence knew of Steele's election investigation for the Clinton campaign, but no later than early July 2016. Thus, as discussed in Section 5D1A3, Steele's sources may have been compromised by the Russians at a time prior to the creation of the Steele reports and throughout the FBI's Crossfire Hurricane investigation.